Hey everybody, before we get started, just reminding this episode brought to our patrons like Adam DeHarp, Architect 10, Baxter G, Carlos, Dragon, Ferris, Jeremy Vasquez, Just the Fae, Jonathan Sandoval, Legendary Boss Hunter, Regent Raptor, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvar, Sean Pryor, some guy named Bob, 723, and Varian the Crow, and viewers like you. If you like what we do, want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon, get access to episodes early and lots of other goodies, and it really helps us out. Thank you for your support, everybody. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. It's time for a spooky Halloween foreigner, because it can still be spooky even in November. It's Van Gogh. So, if this is your first Wanted, shame on you, but also welcome. Anyway, on Wanted we break down a character's real-life history and or folklore. History in this case for real-life people. Their lore with a capital L and fate, you know, all that stuff we do that's made up by fate. It's important. Their mechanics and their rarity, not their star rarity, because we normally only cover 4 stars, because you guys don't really watch limited 3-star videos. But we're here. So we'll cover their banner rarity, not their star rarity, and lots of other little things in between. Now, as I said at the Nemo Wanted, which is already out, has been out for almost a week, as of the time I'm actually recording this. Big spoiler warning for Van Gogh. So this will probably give away lots of Van Gogh secret stuff that is coming out in Imaginary Scramble and various other things going on there. So if you don't want to know about that, just keep grinding those spiny scales. Just like me. I'm also going to give a unusual one here, but a little bit of a content warning for mental health stuff. Van Gogh was famously not a very well man, and we'll be discussing a couple of famous anecdotes. No gory details, pretty matter-of-factly, but you know. If that's the kind of thing that skeeves you out or upsets you, maybe give this one a pass. You know, mute the video and watch to the end so I get the ad rev, but, you know, don't hurt yourself. Okay, so, beginning with the history. Vincent Willem van Gogh, and yes, the Dutch pronunciation is Gogh, with a little bit of guttural in there. Obviously, I won't be saying it that whole way this entire time, because that's a little bit of extra effort for the Anglo in me and in the audience. The generally accepted pronunciation in English is Van Gogh, but you can also apparently say Van Gogh or Van Gogh. So, apparently they're all cool. We're going to go with Go, though. Go. Anyway, Vincent was born 1853, lived until 1890. He was an incredibly prolific and very famous, now anyway, Dutch painter, specifically of Post-Impressionist style works. Many people will recognize this style and his specific works for his vibrant use of color and very expressive brushwork, all these sorts of things we see about at the time. So Van Gogh's father was a minister. He had, at least to the story, an important younger brother. He had several siblings, actually, but the most important to his life was his younger brother, Theodorus Van Gogh, a.k.a. Theo, was his nickname. Theo was an art dealer and supported his brother financially and emotionally through various letters they exchanged, basically all of which Theo kept, and many of Van Gogh's letters were published after his death. So Van Gogh quite possibly set the standard in popular culture for the tortured artist. He was always written about as a serious child. He drew from a young age. He very briefly became an art dealer, same as his brother Theo, before he quit that job and started drifting around becoming a full-time painter. He was notoriously unlucky in love. He had several bouts of psychotic or manic episodes, and he did spend some time in mental asylums. While he was alive, his paintings sold very poorly, but posthumously, they are some of the most expensive paintings in history. Van Gogh paintings have gone for the most amounts of money. Now, a lot of that turnaround has to do with the efforts of Theo's wife, Johanna, I guess you would just pronounce it as Yo, but spelled Joe, Van Gogh Bonger. She translated and published many of Theo and Vincent's letters and inherited some 200-plus Van Gogh works when both Vincent and Theo had passed on, and worked effortlessly to display them and increase the appreciation for Vincent van Gogh in the art world. Did a lot of heavy lifting after his death to make sure people actually understood that he was really good, and generally, now, we agree. Many of you probably know about this one, but Van Gogh had a very famous incident where in a fit of rage during an argument with his associate, Paul Gauguin, he cut off part of his own ear with a razor, allegedly giving it to a prostitute later, and that basically ended their relationship. Several of his pictures show him wearing a bandage around his ear, and there are other instances of self-harm reported to him, so quite a lot of things going on with this poor man. Great paintings, though. So Van Gogh died on the 29th of July in 1890, after allegedly shooting himself in the stomach with a revolver, very strongly depressed after his brother's death. Theo died some 6 months later. Now, there's a little bit of scholarship that Vincent van Gogh's death might not have been suicide. For instance, there were no reports of the kind of powder burns that would have come from such a self-inflicted wound. But barring some kind of time travel, we'll probably know the exact circumstances of his death. It's a little open-ended, but there are skeptics and scholars on both sides of the variations. Now, Van Gogh is a very prolific artist. He painted constantly. He had many favored subjects and series of paintings, including portraits and self-portraits, extensive paintings of flowers, especially sunflowers, but quite a few others. Many, many nature scenes such as olives and cypress trees, orchards in bloom, and wheat fields. Very big things going on there. Some of his most famous paintings are obviously several of his self-portraits, which you've probably seen. The Yellow House, which was a painting of his home in, I'm going to assume that's Arles, not Arles, France. But he did a lot of work there in the house he rented, and there's several other connected to the Yellow House as well, such as The Bedroom, another one you've probably heard of. Another one of his famous ones is The Potato Eaters, showing a peasant family at dinner in a natural setting, not very staged. Another famous one that has some interesting implications is the Cafe Terrace at Night. It depicts a cafe in Arles at night, which is still existent to this day and is now named Cafe Van Gogh. And of course, probably his most famous and most imitated painting, Starry Night, also The Starry Night, which was painted from inside his room at the asylum in Saint-Romain-de-Provence. And it has a strong contrast of light and dark. It shows his troubled mental state at the time. You know, he painted it from the view outside his window. Very expressive, very well known. Also, Van Gogh very famously took inspiration from imported Japanese woodblock prints. He had a substyle among his work, which he called basically Japanesery, which influenced his work, some other later artists around the time. I don't know if it's ever explicitly stated anywhere, but I would assume this is why people thought of him as a servant and why he would have been a popular enough character in Japan to base a servant off of. But yes, he was fascinated by woodblock imports, which were starting to come out of Japan more and more around the time of his life, so it's very interesting. Now, in Amsterdam, there is the Van Gogh Museum. It was set up by a dedicated foundation. It contains a large bulk of his paintings on display. It is one of the most popular tourist attractions in the Netherlands, being the most visited museum in that country, and 23rd most popular museum in the world. Top 25, everybody. And if you want an insight into Van Gogh, most of his letters, I believe, are all published online in various translations. So you can access those. I will link those in the description. If I do not, please yell at me in the comments. But that should give you more keen insight into his mental state, his opinions on art, his art philosophy, and how he, constructs the paintings. All kinds of interesting stuff. All right. Last chance to get off the spoiler train. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now, as we move into the lore, remember all that stuff I said? Well, I won't say throw it away, but put a very big pin in that, because shit is about to get fate weird. Also, forgive my non-specific verbiage here forth. I don't have a Van Gogh to check the exact translations, and I believe you need to clear the event to get all this access to the profile stuff anyway, so we'll be using some previous translations for some of the language here, so if it doesn't line up exactly with how it got translated, mubby. Only so much research I can do doing this preemptively. So, what servant Van Gogh actually is 80% the Oceanid Clytie, 5% Vincent van Gogh, and 15% of a black box received from the outer gods. Now, to explain that one, the story goes that old Vinny, the red-headed madman, not kidding by the way, that was a nickname in France for him, had a close encounter of the eldritch kind, which the Starry Night is supposed to be a reflection of. Now, the power Van Gogh received from this interaction would manifest as a noble phantasm with the power to amplify other foreigners to true divinity, which would in turn allow their outer god patron a lot more influence. So basically, amps up their power level, more spooky shit happens. The story then supposes that Van Gogh committed suicide to avoid being used by the outer gods in this way. Now, knowing that even if they just summon Van Gogh as a heroic spirit, which he totally qualifies for, Eldritch Woods or not, did you miss the part about the paintings and the most money in the world? Big fame boost. He would reject them again, so the outer gods, that's parentheses yes, concoct a plan. They will use imaginary number bullshit to patch in Van Gogh's memories and abilities to a brand new saint graph, which is Clytie's. So, brief snapshot of Clytie's myth, as accounted by your old boy Ovid. Clytie is a water nymph, daughter of Okeanos and Tethys, the ocean deities. She falls in love with Helios, the sun god, until the Aphrodite makes him fall in love with a Babylonian princess named, oh boy, Leucothi? Lucothue? It's an OE at the end. Not sure about that one. Not going to linger on it. Anyway, that's revenge for Helios tattling on her to Hephaestus. So Clytie is driven mad with jealousy. First, she reveals the affair to Leucothoe's father, who has her buried alive. Naturally, this turns off Helio a little bit, so he doesn't go back to Clytie, causing her to basically sit and rest in place and stare at him until she ends up transforming into a flower. In the original myth, a heliotrope. So obviously, there are some possible drifts in this myth, especially once we get out of the classical period. Many modern authors recount this tale as involving Apollo for very obvious reasons, the sun bits and his track record. Ovid himself wasn't really super clear about the split. Historically, pre-Ovid, it was supposed to be Helios, but in his other works, Ovid does not always divide the two very cleanly, so it could have been Apollo. He doesn't really name-check them specifically. Additionally, most modern versions say she became a sunflower, as the term used was a turnsole, but later linguistics, tournesol, literally the French word for sunflower, is almost exclusively used to refer to the common plant sunflower. Though because that is a plant native to North America, they would not have appeared in Greece or Italy during the classical period. Anyway, thematically, being mad jelly and super depressed has strong Van Gogh vibes, and once you apply the retroactive shift that Clytie is the nymph who becomes a sunflower, thanks mystery, she's a perfect container for those Van juices, because of Van Gogh's longtime love of sunflowers and the color yellow. Seriously, it's a perfect matchup there. So, a lot of Van Gogh's mannerisms and even mechanics can be attributed to her patchwork nature, as the Van Gogh elements actively contest her own Clytie-ness. So a lot of this event is obviously her finding her own footing and eventually basically realizing herself as Clytie Van Gogh. Not necessarily Clytie, not necessarily Van Gogh, but one thing, Clytie Van Gogh. So the name Van Gogh as the servant name worked perfectly. Now, what outer god Van Gogh is plugged into isn't exactly clear, not name-checked explicitly, and no very famous allusions, such as Hokusai and the Big C himself. Early, some people theorized that with the heavy use of yellow and the yellow house, which is actually Van Gogh's second NP, it might be the influence of the king in yellow, but this event we're in is not nearly meta and entropic enough for that. We're also lacking other major thematic elements of Big H. Call me when somebody sings Casilda's song. Now, if it was Carcosa House, then we'd be fucked. Real place, look it up. So, instead, I, with my big Cthulhu mythos brain, will concur with the general assessment of the community that this entity is probably supposed to be Volthoom, a somewhat obscure old one from a Clark Ashton Smith story of the same name. The Sleeper of Ravermos dwells underground on Mars and is said to take the form of an enormous plant bloom with a humanoid shape in the center of it. Naturally, Japan and some other artists have interpreted Volthoom as a kind of Alorane type thing, you know, a hot chick with a flower lower half. Not 100% what Smith meant, but close enough. Anyway, Van Gogh is a fairly major character in our current event, which we now know will be added to the main interlude in a couple of years, and it does have 2 story-only St. Quartz interludes coming up. So, no skill buffs there, big focus on the story. Obviously a lot to work with and a lot to chew through. I hope you enjoyed all that. And maybe that clears up some stuff if you didn't quite get it in reading the narrative. Or if you forgot stuff because you had to go farm rainbow teeth for like 5 hours. Anyway, speaking of skills, let's move on to mechanics. Mechanicum's time! This is going to be a pretty interesting one. So, Van Gogh is a foreigner, obviously. Fairly low attack and high HP. HP number 3. And she is also quick arts buster with very high NP gain, even accounting for pretty good hit counts. So, her NP is support arts. That does make it a little bit awkward, obviously, when you've got that many quick cards but an arts NP. But basically what it does, you have an almost guaranteed chance to inflict terror on enemies for 3 turns with a 60% chance to proc, which is pretty good. It gives allies 50 to 100% crit up based on NP level, so NP level 1 is 50, 5 is 100, everything in between. 10 stars per turn for 3 turns, buffs on herself, obviously. And attack up for all allies for 3 turns based on overcharge starts at 30%. Additionally, any unit with the Entity of the Outer Realm passive gets plus 100% critical damage for 3 turns automatically. So, it is a stunner and a powerful crit steroid / charisma type effect all in one. Big boy damage buffs, especially for mostly foreigners. We'll get a little into the comp bit later. So, first skill is a 1-use 5 turns Guts with 1k to 3k HP. Has a strong chance to inflict self with up to 3 stacks of Curse. For 10 turns, does 100 damage, and then you gain 5 to 10% NP for each stack of curse. So you got a battery, and a guts battery. No, not that last part, actually. Cut that out, me. I won't, because that's a joke. A Van Gogh, if you will. Second skill, then, is a big chance to hit all enemies with 10 to 20% defense down. Should get through some debuff resistance, even. That lasts for 3 turns. Also hits enemies with a flat 20% quick resistance down for 3 turns. Gives all allies 1 hits, 3 turns evades. Pretty solid. And regains them 300 HP per turn for 5 turns. But it also has an increased chance, the almost guaranteed effect, to get you 100 curse damage for 10 turns to all allies. So you'll keep up for that first 5 turns, but you'll start losing overall HP once that HP per turn goes away. Final skill gives a targeted ally 20 to 30% attack up for 3 turns, increased star weight for 3 turns, and it also gives Van Gogh an on-hit buff, where she can remove 1 stack of curse from herself when using a quick card, and if she does that, she gets plus 10% attack for 3 turns. It also has a demerit that it moves all stacks of curse currently on the party to herself. So you can do some interesting synergy there with all your different effects. Passives, you've obviously got Outer Realm A, gives you some extra star gen and other fun stuff. You've got Insanity C, not Madness Enhancement C, for her 1 Buster card to hit a little bit stronger. Item Construction B- to help with those debuff rates. Not that you really need it, but, every little bit counts. Divinity B+ for some more damage, and also a unique passive, Curse of the Sunflower, Sunflower Curse, which prevents her from being killed by curse damage, something integral to her kit, but also could be useful for some challenge quests. And basically the way this is phrased is, can't be reduced below 1 HP by curse. So you know how some skills that deal you damage can't take you to 0 HP, actually? It's like that, but for curse, all the time. All the time curse. So in general, I would say Van Gogh is clearly centered to be some kind of quick-ish / foreigner support. Technically, most of the stuff is just attack and crit up, so it fits any kind of card strength, but she does have a quick resistance down, and obviously you will probably be generating the most stars with which to crit if you can use some quick cards. She also has some very heavy potential to crit herself, because she also gets the bonus damage from her own NP, and can manipulate curse stacks to give her more damage on a turn. Outer Realm buff basically covers every foreigner unit, including Secret Foreigner Summer BB, plus a couple of our space friends in the current Okita Soji, who would really like some of the buffs Van Gogh dishes out, and future welfare, Mysterious Ranmaru X. So currently, with servants that are out as of now, I think she works best with units like Summer Okita or Fellow Foreigner Voyager to both give big amps to crit and quick damage. Given that she has a very mild boon to quick and a strong boon to crits, you might be able to pull off some shenanigans with Scotty and some generic quick AoE sweepers, and then follow up with crits on the next turn, but you can also still double Scotty, so it's probably not the most efficient. Given that her buff does extend to Summer BB, there are probably some weird faceless moon things you can do. I'm not going to theorize on that one because that's a little bit RNG. You got to wait for the right command hand to come up to freeze it, but you may be able to pull off some weird things with that one as well. Otherwise, in general, use foreigners if you've got a quick foreigner or a Summer Okita, because again, she has the outside quality because she has a jetpack glued to her back. That'll probably be your best bet. But that said, it'll be sometime coming. You gotta wait, I think, a full year for this, basically, depending. But I think Van Gogh's scariest place is probably in some kind of unholy triangle with fellow quick and curse weirdo units, Doman and Jacques de Molay. So Doman, who is coming out fairly soon, gives big boosts to critical and attack for chaotic / evil units, which Van Gogh is. She counts as chaotic evil. He also has his own guts and has a quick AoE NP, which will get the advantage out of that extra attack up and that quick rest down. Jacques, who is also chaotic evil, has a regular charisma and some crit ups, and defensive options for evil allies, and her own quick AoE NP, both of which, these quick AoE NPs, have evil curse synergy. They will curse enemies and do more damage to curse, and mean curse does more damage. But even without that part, you're looking at something like 280% critical damage up and 120% attack up for somebody on that team with multiple hard defenses. Jacques has an invul, and Gogh has an evade for the whole squad. So, this will probably be a very, very spicy setup for some farming and some challenge quests. I don't really know if it, loops or anything, but you've got plenty of battery opportunities in the team, and Jiminy Christmas, that is a lot of critical damage, guys. So keep that one in your hats for later. Now, CE-wise, having a non-damaging NP puts this pretty interesting in context. You probably want to arm Van Gogh with quick or crit CEs, since that's the bulk of her focus and her cards. Again, obviously, she does not necessarily overtly buff quick, but she has a little bit of quick res down, and because they're 3 of her cards, you're going to be using her quick cards a lot. So, keep that in mind. This means, obviously, imaginary around works, but also similar types of CEs like Holy Knight Sign, Young Maiden, Dangerous Beast, etc., etc. Key thing to remember is avoid NP damage up. That doesn't do anything for this build, but you can also skip all the damage amps and go for purely passive or support build stuff. Add a 2030 for more stars, add a Prisma Cosmos so she NPs more, whatever floats your boat. This also makes her Bond CE fairly okay. It's 8 stars per turn and gives all allies an extra 15% crit damage while she's on the field. It's not too spicy, but it's a little something, and it is one of those rare cases where, other than for the stat boosts, you don't necessarily, need a CE to make Van Gogh work. It's just helpful. Alrighty, so that leaves us with Ascension and Skills, which for a foreigner, follow their own patterns. It can be easy or hard, depending. Ascension is pretty straightforward. You need 10 of various mats. None of them are new. Hopefully you can scrape all those together. Skills, on the other hand, do get steep at higher levels. You'll need 15 pomegranates, that's Fruits of Immortality, and Comet Shards per skill, so keep that in mind. Very spicy. Now, for mechanical bonuses, Van Gogh is a bonus unit in Imaginary Scramble, which will be added to the main interlude in a couple of years. Obviously, for banners, she is on this current Imaginary Scramble banner, and as a limited SSR, she will be showing up in all future Lucky Bag campaigns, but she does have some future pure rate-ups. There will be one in the form of Interlude Campaign 17, which is when her first interlude is added. I mentioned that earlier. And obviously, for the main interlude campaign for Imaginary Scramble, she also has a banner in that setup. So keep those in mind, everybody. And honestly, that's all I've got for you folks. I hope I painted a vivid enough picture for you. I'll see you in just a few weeks for Asha Doman, pretty sure. And be sure to check out Wanted Raiko and Kentucky before then as well, because they'll get some rate-ups, I believe, in the Heian-Kyo pre-release. And if you missed it, check up on the Wanted Nemo. And of course, I remembered, if you are out there and you got a Van Gogh and you didn't watch Wanted, I'm putting it out into the world. I curse you. But with dire portents out of the way, it's time for a very simple wrap-up. Be sure to give this video a like if you liked it. Spread that juice for that algorithm. Leave your comments down below. How did you do on your Van Gogh rolls? Despair? Success? Existential crisis? Put those feelings into art. You can also catch our Discord link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get all of our latest Wanted videos and more. And make sure you ring that bell so you always know when we're posting a new video, because obviously I had to offset this one a little bit for the spoilers. So, ringing the bell is helpful. You can consider joining our channel membership for access to membership badges and emotes, and supporting us on Patreon, like I said at the front of the show. Could have gotten this episode early, and could have gotten Nemo early too, so consider supporting us on Patreon. Also, in general, want to throw out shout-outs to all that other stuff. If you happen to stumble upon this without seeing our other stuff, this channel, we do a podcast every week called Let's Talk FGO. Go check that out. It's full of news, rough event guides, our thoughts and feelings on the story and stuff, all kinds of helpful chatter. Check that one out. We do other regular stuff like gaming. And indeed, if you are still in a little bit of a spooky mood, Lucky and I, my co-host on Let's Talk, have been streaming on our regular Monday streams the new Plague's Tale game, so go check those out if you haven't already. It's a good time for your late seasonal spookums, and I'll see you in all our other stuff. All right, that's it, everybody. Good night.